Once, I went to the country to friends. A normal working Friday. And in the evening, anticipating the taste of barbecue and beer, I was already racing along the highway from the city towards the dacha. It was not far, only 30 kilometers from the city, and I knew the road by heart, that I could get there even with my eyes closed. That day it was raining with a thunderstorm, and the visibility of the road was poor, so I drove slower than usual. Getting into an accident today was not at all in my plans. Halfway through I got stuck in traffic. Where did he end up on the track? After 2 hours of turtle movement, I saw the cause of the traffic jam. Road repair. Well, as always. While I'm driving, adventures always happen, road repairs, accidents. Well, I'll have to go around. And how lucky. Directly in front of the barriers that the workers put up, there is an exit to a country road and a sign indicating that there is a detour through the village on the other side. The sign was so old that the name of the village is no longer readable. Well, maybe not everything is so bad. Well, I'll stay for now, bypassing the repair work, I thought. Driving off the road, I noticed that as soon as I decided to go around, all the other cars immediately turned around and drove towards the city. It's strange somehow. Maybe they know a shorter way. Well, okay, I had already moved out onto the dirt road and it was already reluctant to turn around. It was difficult to drive, especially in my, far from new, passenger car. And then the roofs of the houses appeared in the distance. It was already after midnight, and the rain only intensified, turning into small hail. Super. It was just what I needed. In such weather, it was almost impossible to continue the road, and I decided to call my friends and say that I would arrive only in the morning, and I myself would try to spend the night in this village, hoping that someone would give me shelter. I picked up the phone. Of course. No signal. It's the 21st century outside, but it's worth turning off the main road a couple of kilometers from the city and that's it, you find yourself in the Middle Ages. Okay, I hope in a drunken stupor my comrades will not look for me in the middle of the night, but will simply fall asleep, and in the morning I will pump them up. I drove up to the first houses. Apparently, this village consisted of literally one road, along which there were houses on the left, then on the right. Speaking of houses, they obviously didn't look very residential. I did not see what happened to the other houses, but the first two plunged me into a little shock. To say that they were old is not enough. They were dilapidated, rotten, overgrown with impenetrable thickets of some kind of bush. There was no light in any of the windows. I was not surprised, because the time is late and people are already sleeping. Although are there people here at all? Suddenly, lightning flashed, and I caught a glimpse of a silhouette on the road. He was tall, I would even say lanky, his arms seemed longer than those of an ordinary person, and this something was dressed in some kind of rags. At the moment of enlightenment on the street, after lightning, she ran towards the house closest to me. All this happened in just a matter of seconds. I thought, maybe because of poor visibility and fatigue, I dreamed that this was some kind of monster. This, of course, was a man who was fleeing the hail and fled to his home. I explained to myself. Great, so there are people in this godforsaken place, and I can arrange accommodation with them. I drove as close as possible to the house where the man was running. I took my wallet and money with me. Suddenly the owners would ask for a fee for the night, and, having gathered my strength, I jumped out of the car. I ran to the front door of the house under the porch. Wet. It immediately became cold and damp. Yes, the weather in early October is just something. As they say, the weather does not have bad weather. Even as it is. The porch I ended up under was leaking, but either way it's better than standing in the pouring rain. I knocked on the door. Masters. Is there anyone at home? Silence. I knock more. Nothing happened. Tried to open, nothing. What to do? Running to another house means getting completely wet and more likely to get sick. No, I do not need it. Maybe you need to go around the house and there will be another door. I need to know. With this plan, I moved along the wall of the house around the corner, glancing briefly out the window. For a second, I thought I saw some movement there. Somehow, through thickets of impenetrable bushes, I got to the back of the house. The door was indeed here, it opened onto the garden. Although I'm not sure if those standing crosses were a vegetable garden. Wait, crosses? Where are the crosses from? The backyard of this house looked more like an old cemetery than a kitchen garden. Something is wrong here. I didn't have time to think about what I saw, because behind me the door opened with a wild creak. Without thinking twice, I dived inside. The door closed. The house smelled of mustiness, dampness and, as it were, burning. Well, at least the rain doesn't stop me now. I took the phone and turned on the flashlight on it, briefly noticed that the phone had 15% charge left. I began to move the flashlight around the room. Table, chair, mug, plates. Yes, I'm in the kitchen. Then I remembered that I would have broken into the house without an invitation and should at least inform the owners that I am here. Masters, do you accept overnight guests? If anything, I can offer you money for help. In response, silence and only the sound of drops on the roof destroyed it. So, well, if there is no one here, then maybe I can spend the night unnoticed, and if the owners come, then I will kindly explain everything to them. Yes, there is a plan. You need to find at least a bed, do not sleep on the floor. I definitely won't find a bed in the kitchen, so I need to make my way inside the house. The floor creaked under my steps. The atmosphere is so. Night, an old house with its own graveyard in the backyard, a creaky floor. At the heart of all the horror movies put together. A chill ran through my body. I went through the kitchen and found myself in a small room. The room was in a terrible state. The wallpaper was peeling off the walls, the ceiling was covered in smudges, and in general the room looked terrible, and the floor was covered with dry mud smeared. Next to the table was a box spring bed. Its headboard was very rusty, which suggested that no one lives in this house at all. No one will sleep in such an old bed. Without much ceremony, realizing that this house was most likely abandoned and the owners would not come, I sat on the bed, not at all afraid that it would fall apart and I would collapse on the floor. So, well, the bed didn't fall apart, that's a good sign. Putting myself a purse instead of a pillow, I closed my eyes and imperceptibly fell asleep. The fear somehow disappeared completely. I woke up from an extraneous sound. It was as if someone was walking around the kitchen, and the floor creaked disgustingly under the steps of the walking one. Opening my eyes and trying to understand what I was doing here, I sat on the bed and shouted, "Is there anyone here? The steps have stopped. There is clearly someone there." I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. There is no one. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The floor was covered in fresh dirt. What it is? And where did it go? The thoughts in my head began to churn with fear. Turning to the exit from the kitchen, I saw a tall shadow flicker into the room. I run there. Again dirt. It led towards a small hatch on the floor. How did I not see him right away when I entered this room? I plucked up the courage to approach the hatch. Open. No. For what? What if there is something interesting there? Yeah, for example, some kind of ghoul, that's interesting. Well, do you need to do something? Need to. After arguing with myself, I began to open the hatch. The hatch is open. I shone my phone there. The wooden steps went deep into darkness, and nothing else could be seen. Claws. Descent into the unknown. Then I noticed that the phone had 5% charge left. So, I quickly go downstairs, look around, send evil spirits to the next world and fall asleep. Sounds like a plan. As soon as I bent down to start going down, something suddenly pushed me from behind, and I flew head over heels down. Silence. Headache. I'm lying on something hard and unpleasant. Feeling with my fingers, I realized that it was something porous and hard. Bone. It's a bone. Instantly jumping up and illuminating everything around me with a flashlight, I found that the entire floor of the basement was strewn with bones and human skulls. I was just numb with fear. Where am I? Who pushed me? How to get out of here? While my thoughts were sluggishly digested after the blow to my head, something stirred in the corner. Something was sitting there and eating, judging by the slurping sounds. Suddenly, the sound stopped and he began to slowly rise and was probably 2.5 meters in height. Dry long legs, hands were below the knees, sickle-shaped fingers or claws on the hands are indistinguishable. There were no eyes, or I just didn't notice them. Dropping the phone, I somehow dodged it and fell. I jumped up and began to climb the stairs like a bullet, picking up the phone from the floor. Then I heard that this ghoul got to his feet and was already running towards me. With all the strength that remained, I climbed very steep steps, not at all thinking that under my feet and hands I had earth with rotten carrion. Suddenly, I was dragged down by the leg. It's good that my shoes are not lace-up, but zippered. Quickly unfastening it in one motion, the boot remained with this bastard and it fell down. I opened the hatch, it's already light outside. With a quick movement, taking a purse, I crashed with all my might into the front door, into the one that was locked, in the hope that I would knock it out to hell. Whether I weigh a little, or I no longer had the strength to disperse, but the door met me with a dull blow, and I flew back. There's a bolt on the door, I'm a blind oaf. Getting up quickly, I ran to the door, removed the bolt, and then behind me I heard a vile breath. Without looking at what was behind, I opened the door, flew out of the house and ran to the car. The rain had already stopped, and fog was creeping over the ground. Once in the car, I immediately pulled the handbrake and drove off. I looked in the rearview mirror, and there. Only the old cemetery is visible, but there are no houses. I still made it to the country house. Friends saw me in the morning almost speechless. Dirty, bloody cut on the whole chest, no shoe. I told everything. A friend looked at me in bewilderment and said, "There is no village there. There is only an ancient cemetery, and it appeared after. Although wait, there was a village, but it burned down more than 100 years ago. Everyone who lived there died. And they buried all the inhabitants there, on the site of the burned village. Yes, perhaps we will go home along a different road."